You're about to enter into a new world of knowledge, curiosities, and high strangeness. This is a podcast of Straight Up Strange Productions.
You're listening to Mysteries and Monsters. I'm your host, Paul Bestall. We head beneath the waves to uncover the reality of one of the most fearsome predators to swim in the sea, the Megalodon. Yet, is it the swift, surface-breaching killing machine many claim it was? Not so, says Max Hawthorne, and he's built a case to show that most of what we think we know is fantasy. From creatures of the prehistoric past to apex predators of today, we go hunting for the reality of these terrifyingly wonderful creatures. But before that, don't forget you can support Mysteries and Monsters by signing up at patreon.com/mysteriesandmonsters. $4 a month gets you ad-free episodes, guaranteed early releases, bonus content and more. A massive thank you to my latest patrons, Amanda, Dav, Patricia, Patrick, Phil and Bri. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you to each and every one of you that continues to support the show. It really means a lot. Thank you so much. We're not sure what's going on with Apple Podcasts. They keep saying it's okay, and then they keep blocking it. So once I know what's going on there, it'll also be available on Apple Podcasts if you prefer to sign up that way. So keep your eyes peeled. Mysteries and Monsters is across all social media platforms. Please subscribe to the Mysteries and Monsters channel on YouTube. You can also visit mysteriesandmonsters.com for episodes and Mysteries and Monsters merchandise. Our opening and closing themes are by the incredible Weary Pines. Thank you as always to Dean Bestall for his marvellous artwork. The show is produced by Brennan Storr of the Ghost Story Guys, and Mysteries and Monsters is delighted to be a part of the Straight Up Strange network. Well, as Chief Brody famously said, you're going to need a bigger boat. And I think looking at this week's episode, we're going to need one hell of a boat. We dive back under the waves once again on the hunt for the Megalodon in the fossil record, in the company of the Prince of Paleo Fiction, Max Hawthorne. Prepare to have your misconceptions of this mighty predator shaken. Max, welcome back.
Thank you so much, and thank you for putting up with me.
It's all right. Thank you for wanting to come back. It's a win-win for both of us, I feel.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we just need to deal with the elephant in the room before we dive into this. I've always had a love, since being a child, of paleontology and fossils and dinosaurs and strange creatures of the sea. I am perplexed, Max, I have to say, as to why there is a feeling out there that these enormous beasts are still with us. Do you think it's fantasy? It's wishing for some monster to really exist still that's not something that would be considered a cryptid? Or is it just people are just deluding themselves, sadly?
Well, I think there's a combination of things. The first thing is we're talking about the shark, right? Gigantic. Yes. Okay. There are large extant sharks like whale sharks and basking sharks. And basking sharks are mackerel sharks, just like Megalodon was and the great white is. So they do share a similar body plan. And the largest basking sharks can be 40 feet in length. So when somebody sees one of those, especially if it's 10 or 20 feet down, or from a distance, or even sometimes close up if you don't know the anatomy, it's easy to misinterpret one for the other and say, oh my God, I saw a 35-foot white shark that was insane, etc. On the other hand, however, there is evidence around now that we do have a larger than normal macro-predatory shark still with us. Is it Megalodon or another prehistoric holdover? I don't think so, but I've actually spent some time studying this topic. When I wrote Monsters and Marine Mysteries, for example, there's an entire chapter on mega sharks, and I went over a series of sightings, and this is based on actual physical evidence, typically in the form of giant bites taken out of other animals and such, that documents the existence of something larger than normal size. So I went up through a whole series of monsters in there, the beast of Briar Island, all the way up to the Galapagos giant. And there is evidence out there. I mean, when you see, for example, the Galapagos giant was a 40-foot whale shark filmed off the Galapagos Islands by Dr. Simon Pierce, the marine biologist who is head of the Marine Megafauna Foundation and arguably the world's greatest expert on whale sharks. I mean, he swims with whale sharks the size of a bus, pregnant females, and gives them sonograms. So, I mean, he knows his stuff. And he photographed this 40-foot female with a big bite scar on its left peduncle, left flank, back near the tail region. And that bite is approximately 4 feet across. And that suggests an enormous predator attacked that whale shark, but took a bite out of it, but failed to finish the job, let's say. But I actually did a documentary. It's free on YouTube. People go on if you look up @real Max Hawthorne on Google, that'll take you to my YouTube channel. And the previous, one before documentary that's on there is called Mega Shark or Megalodon. And this was a study done of a 30-foot humpback whale carcass that washed up on Briar Island that I was able to work with courtesy of research and evidence from the Tudor family, Amy and her husband Jess. And this poor humpback had been wounded by either a small ship or a large boat, like a ship strike. Yeah. Its left scapula had been ripped up, and it had like a large wound on there. And that wound wasn't fatal per se, but apparently it hurt the humpback enough and it was bleeding enough that something gigantic was able to catch it that it normally wouldn't have been able to and finish it off. So this humpback had 2 at least visible bites on it that were in excess of a yard in diameter. And they have tooth notches and everything. So there's no denying that they're shark bites. And that suggests a great white, most likely, in the realm of approximately 32 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's around 10 meters almost.
Yeah.
So, it's a very large predatory shark. But the evidence and belief is, and Discovery stated this initially, and I align with it, is that occasionally great whites appear to sometimes suffer from gigantism, where sharks are fish, and both fish and reptiles, have what is called indeterminate growth. For the people out there that don't know what that means, indeterminate means undetermined or ongoing. So, how they say you put a fish in a fish tank, it'll grow to the size of the tank or something like that. It's limited by that. Yeah. Well, that's not necessarily true, but the point is that fish and reptiles grow their entire lives. Typically, they grow fast and they reach sexual maturity, and then their growth slows, but they still continue to grow. So, for example, a python, I had a python as a kid, and he would grow a foot a year with no problem. Boom, 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 even sometimes more. Yeah. But once he got to 15 feet, it would start to slow. And then it might be just a few inches a year. But the growth continues. In this case, with gigantism, the fish might be experiencing unchecked growth, and it's just growing and growing and growing until it gets to primeval proportions, shall we say. And that's a fascinating notion. And there are plenty of animals out there that do get to double normal size. There are toads that normally grow to 4 inches in body length that 8-inch specimens have been found. Yeah. I personally found it's in Monsters and Marine Mysteries in the book when I was discussing gigantism. I caught a species of predatory beetle, which I used to collect as a kid. I thought they were really cool little monsters with their pinchers and stuff. And they're normally maybe an inch long. And I found one that was 3 inches long. And it was definitely the same species, but it was just insanely large by comparison for some reason. It wasn't a matter of gender, sexual dimorphism is when one male or female is bigger than the other. This was just a mutant insect. Yeah. So, and since we know that there were prehistoric predatory sharks that could grow to 50 feet, for a white shark to hit 30 or even 40 feet or so, its body design can still handle being at that size. Like how like you've seen people that sometimes suffer from gigantism.
Yeah.
Robert Wadlow is the most famous one. He's listed in Guinness as the world's tallest man ever recorded. And I believe his maximum height was 8 feet and 11 and a half inches or something like that.
Yeah.
So basically 9 feet tall. But he was plagued with problems. He was walking with a cane from a very young age, and he died very young.
Yeah.
So our bodies aren't apparently designed for that type of fast growth or that physicality, that size. The shark, on the other hand, doesn't have that problem. So, what I believe that there's ample evidence out there that we do occasionally get a mega shark out there, but it's not something prehistoric. I believe it is a white shark that is tapping into that prehistoric gene, let's say, and it is just getting very, very, very big. The reason, that also, if you think about it, would explain why they're not all over the place.
Yeah.
Because if you had, let's say that Megalodon or its close relative Ototus chubutensis were still alive, we had 40 or 50-foot monsters out there, we would need, per the scientific community, a breeding population of approximately 500 adults to sustain a species. But if there were 500 bust-sized sharks swimming around out there eating carcasses and stuff like that, snacking on surfers, we would know about it.
Yes.
It's pretty hard to miss a blue whale carcass that's being gnawed on by two, creatures with 5-foot dorsal fins and things of that nature. We have drones, we have, everything. So on the other hand, if you had a white shark that, like 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 5,000 mutates like that, you might have two of these things swimming in the entire planet at the same time, occasional sightings and munching on other animals, but they're not all over the place. They're not a breeding population.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so. Absolutely. Since the last time we spoke, which was last summer, I've noticed that there seems to be a theory that they think that they've now recorded the largest great white out there, Max, and whenever I see a story like this, you're the first person that ever pops into my head about these things, with the delightful name of White Death, I believe. Are you aware of this alleged monster of the deep?
I have not heard of it. I know that I thought there was a hokey book at one point out there called that, but I have not heard of this. I'm trying to Google it right now. What shark is known as White Death?
While deep blue is thought to rule the ocean as the largest great white shark ever recorded, a few others have been found to follow closely. Also found in the ocean near Guadalupe, White Death is thought to be a stronger opponent.
Oh, maybe it is. Do they say how big it's supposed to be?
28 feet.
28 feet. And where is this shark?
Guadalupe, allegedly.
Let's see. White Death, Guadalupe. I should just ask you to send me this link or something, because I'm having a hard time finding it.
That's all right, no problems.
But it is infinitely possible, because the smallest shark that I documented in Monsters and Marine Mysteries, the Beast of Briar Island, was 26 feet long, and White Death sounds like the size of the one that attacked. That I wonder if they're basing it off of my research on that. Was that in Guadalupe? That's a good question. There was an incident. Let's see. How big was the monster shark that took this bite? They may be basing it off of this. Let's see. Yep. That must be what they're talking about. And they must be using my calculations from the blog post. If people go on my website, which is either Max Hawthorne with an E on the end, obviously, .com, or CronusRising.com, and look up on the blogs, how big was the monster shark that took this bite? There's a blog post I did on there like 3 or 4 years ago. And this was, I was approached by a marine photographer. His name is Iwan Ranichin, and in 2019 off the coast of Guadalupe, he takes first of all underwater photos of white sharks. That's what he does for a living. So he's quite good at it and quite good at gauging size and everything else like that. And he took photos of a shark called Sea Batch, which was approximately 11 feet long, and all the photos of Sea Batch, including the bite, are in there. And it was weird because a paper put out a thing on this that claimed that sea batch was 15 feet long. It was actually a UK paper, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember the name of it. I'm trying to see if it's in here. I'm sure it is, but I'm just kind of skimming through and stuff. So they claimed that she was 15 feet long, which, of course, would have made the attacker gigantic.
Yeah.
Okay. But Juan corrected it with me and said, no, he goes, I don't know where they got that from. She's actually like 11 feet in length.
Mm.
And so I was able to he sent me great lateral views of her, and I was able to do some number crunching. I think he said they always want to exaggerate stuff and things. So the victim shark, sea batch, went from 11 feet in this UK publication to 15 feet.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is almost 50% bigger.
Yes.
At least 40% larger. Okay.
Mm.
But, The Sun, a UK media outlet called The Sun, released an article.
Yeah. They'll always increase the size of anything in that paper, Max.
Okay. So that explains it. But, so using the photos he sent me, which are amazing photos, you can see that sea batch has a bite on her that's approximately 30 inches wide.
Mm.
Okay. And using that, measurement and using the most conservative bite width to size formula available, I was able to calculate that the attacker was around 28 feet in length.
Mm.
So I would guess that they're taking advantage of my calculations and research on there to gauge the size of this monster.
Mm.
See?
Mm.
But, so, and that's fine. It'd be nice to say, hey, according to Max Hawthorne or something like that, I did all the work, but okay. But, so Juan's photos are very telling.
Yeah.
I mean, they even showed the underside where you could see individual two scores where, she was struck by this larger, which presumably was an aggressive female that attacked her and tried to even maybe possibly make a meal out of her.
Yeah.
But, so that's what they're calling it now, White Death.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I was going to call it something like, because I like to put I'm a victim of, oh my God, what is it called when see, this shows you I haven't had enough sleep last night. Alliteration.
Yes.
Like I did like the Beast of Briar Island, the Galapagos Giant, the Perth Canyon Colossus. These are all mega shark names I come up with. So I was going to do something like the Guadalupe, Gargantua Guadalupe or something, some G's type stuff.
Yeah.
But if they want to call it Great White Death or whatever, that's fine. But to be honest, it is not the biggest one out there. It is just simply isn't. The shark that I documented with the help of the tutors is around 32 feet in length, if not bigger. It has larger jaws by at least 6 inches in terms of width there. And the record will be maybe forever, but I don't know, is Simon Pierce's whale shark with a 4-foot bite on it, which suggested a shark 42 feet in length approximately.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but still, a 28-foot white shark is a big shark.
Yeah.
I mean, that animal would weigh probably 8 tons, Oof. I'm guessing. It would be a monstrous fish. So, that's a lot of exciting stuff out there. We do live in exciting times. Some areas I could do without the excitement, and such. But when it comes to sharks, etc., I mean, we do appear to have a handful of mega sharks out there. They just appear to be ridiculously big, great white sharks. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think this is one of the things I think I've been struck by about this. A lot of it in regards to the continued existence of the Megalodon, I think, is a lot of wishful thinking, or people who, with a great respect, perhaps don't know enough about the level of research that's going on. Because I would imagine, Max, that sharks are probably one of the most studied creatures in the world, primarily because they're so fascinating and we still know so little about them, really.
They are. I mean, they've been around since before the dinosaurs, technically, in assorted forms. They've gone through so many different species over the years and such. They are terrifying creatures. Being attacked by a shark, especially when you're a person who, can't swim at more than 2 or 3 miles an hour at most, and their ability to excise chunks of flesh and remove limbs. And I mean, shark attacks are horrifying.
Yeah.
Surviving one is a miracle at times, and many people have been killed. It's just not a pretty thing. But I mean, they are prehistoric survivors. They have gone through many forms over the eons and such. They were actually, though, I will say this, they were lucky that the asteroid struck the planet at the end of the Cretaceous, because what a lot of people don't know is that there were some large prehistoric sharks, like Cretoxorhina and a few others that got in a 25-foot range or so, maybe, things of that nature. But what people don't know a lot is that by the end of the Cretaceous, there were no macropredatory sharks left. They were extinct. The biggest sharks out there, I think it's possibly called Cretolamna, but maxed out at maybe 10 feet in length. All the larger predatory sharks were extinct, and the evidence suggests that they were all taken out by mosasaurs. See, the mosasaurs, these giant marine monitor lizards, they filled in the ecological niche that was left behind by the pliosaurs when they went extinct around 90 million years ago or so. Yeah. And, they filled in as the big apex predators. And there were some monstrous mosasaurs out there. I mean, they say now that the biggest ones are like 50 or 55 feet. I have a huge fossil in my personal collection that suggests that one species called Prognathodon, or one genus, I should say, hit at least 84 feet in length. Wow. For a very, very large adult. Yeah. I mean, the evidence is quite compelling. It's going to shake up a lot of people when I finally come out with it, but I've been so busy with so many projects and stuff. So they're lucky. I mean, there's already been like a 90-second animation done for this. Yeah. That is waiting for the documentary and what. But the point is that even a 50 or 60-foot mosasaur, they were the apex predators of the seas. And so they were eating all the small and subadult big sharks and probably killing off the adults if they were too big to be eaten, still killing them. Yeah. And you eat all the sharks, you don't get any more big sharks. Yeah. So mosasaurs were so fast, the sharks couldn't escape them, and they became prey, basically. Like a great white shark will feed on a bluefin tuna given the chance. The mosasaurs were apparently doing this to Cretoxorhina and the rest of these big sharks, and they were all gone. So there were no big sharks left at the end of the Cretaceous. And then when the asteroid struck and mosasaurs were wiped out, supposedly, although there are occasional sightings, people claim, who knows, historical and otherwise, but I've never seen one, but I do know a UK guy that saw one swimming next to his ship that was purportedly 100 feet long. Imagine that, if that was possible. I don't know. But anyway, he didn't have a photo. He did have a photo, but it was lost in a scuffle in a bar at the next port and whatever stuff. So who knows? But, point is, based on what we know, you had no more of these big sharks. So after the mosasaurs were gone, Cretolamna was able to fill in the gap. And since it didn't have any competitors, other predators, it grew and grew and grew and evolved into assorted species. So the whole Ototus line, which is currently believed to be what gave rise to Megalodon, although there is some discussions ongoing with that. Originally it was Carcharodon Megalodon, so it was lumped in with the white shark. Then it was Carcharicles Megalodon, and now it's Ototus Megalodon. I guess they can't make up their mind where this poor thing lived, genus-wise, etc. But so the Ototus line, starts around with Ototus obliquus, which was approximately a 30-foot super predator, and then it moves up from there. Went through different forms, and I have a whole collection of the series of teeth showing how they changed morphologically as the species grew and changed, and they went to Chubutensis and Megalodon, and then they disappeared. So I'm sorry, there's a little history lesson there. I just rambling.
That's all right. It's all good. It's all good. I mean, I'm always amazed when I see one of your videos or hear you speak about this particular subject, Max, because you are so knowledgeable. And I think often you get tarred with this brush because you use the term megashark. I think people don't look at what you're talking about or what you're saying. They just presume you must be talking about megalodons, which obviously, as we've just covered, you clearly aren't. And I think a lot of what people want the megalodon to be in the fossil record and how it hunted, I think, is also seems to be a real issue here, because I had to chuckle when you were saying this about how you might have upset the Megalodon fanboys about this, because they seem to have created this powerful, fast-moving, ocean-breaching killing machine, and yet, through your research with your fossils, because the other aspect of this is you don't just have Megalodon teeth, you've got all kinds of bones backing up these theories, is that whilst the Megalodon was a hefty creature, this was a scavenger. This was a creature, due to its morphology and its jaws and everything like that, is not this swift-moving killing machine that a lot of people seem to have this presumption it was.
Yeah, well, you take people's heroes from them, they sometimes don't respond very well. It happens. But so the first thing is, like, when I say mega shark, a mega shark just means a really big shark, preferably a predatory one. The Ototus line is considered what they call mega-toothed sharks, meaning they have big teeth. In fact, I believe the word megalodon actually means big tooth or something like that.
Yeah.
But so people get attached to things that they know, and that's understandable. Like, for example, in Jurassic Park 3, you see this Spinosaurus is introduced, and it's this bipedal, steroided up giant monster that has ninja neck-breaking skills, if you've ever seen the movie, and it grabs a T-Rex and it uses its hand and jaws, and it breaks the T-Rex's neck and kills it in within a second or two, okay? And it was a ridiculous thing to see, especially since the Rex is known to have by far the most powerful bite of any terrestrial carnivore, if we exclude possibly prehistoric sharks, crocs like Deinosuchus,
yes,
but certainly of any theropod. And just the scene where it grabbed this Spinosaurus by the neck and bit down, that would have been the end of it right there. It would have sheared right through it, just like it would a Triceratops's bony frill, and crunch, 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 and end of story. But the thing is that then more and more fossil evidence came out that Spinosaurus was not a bipedal animal.
Yeah.
It actually had 4 short legs, like a crocodile more. It was possibly able to rear up a little bit on its hind legs, like a giant anteater, let's say, or something like that.
Yeah.
But basically, it was a quadruped, and it was semi-aquatic, almost like a turtle that lives in a pond.
Yeah.
It actually basked on the shoreline and went in the water, and crocodile style, and it fed on fish. It had long, relatively slender jaws. It was a piscivore. It even has that shelf, I call it, at the end of the snout inside the jaws, that curve that's designed to snap and hold on to fish.
Yeah.
So this thing was like a gharial, basically.
Yeah.
And when word came out that it was like that and all that, all these people, that the Spinosaurus fanboys, courtesy of Jurassic Park 3, were very, very upset. And you would see these huge brawls going on social media and websites, and people fighting about it and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, the fossils won out, and we now know that Spinosaurus was the largest, longest at least, predatory dinosaur, terrestrial, but it was a quadruped and it fed on fish. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
It was an incredible animal. So when it comes to things like Megalodon, people saw Jaws and they thought, okay, so first of all, we know white sharks weren't exactly like in Jaws, in terms of aggressiveness and holding grudges and all this other stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay. But they just figured, so it would be twice that length and 8 times that weight, and it would just do even more. But that's not how anatomy and gravity and inertia and the laws of nature work necessarily. So when I was I have you were mentioning, I have an extent. My house is like a small museum. Honestly, it really is. I've got stuff I had to stop buying fossils because my wife would probably divorce me or something. So, plus we have a deal that I'm not allowed to extend my domain outside of my office and all that. So I've kind of run out of room. I do have a few dozen boxes stashed somewhere she doesn't know about, but anyway. Sometimes you see stuff, you just got to have it,
Yeah.
I buy things primarily for research value though.
Yeah.
So, when I was studying, I'm what's called an avocational paleontologist, meaning that it's not something that I do for a living. It's more a hobby because, as you know, I write the Cronus Rising series of sci-fi thrillers. Yeah. And these are kind of like Jaws meets Jurassic Park, In fact, actually, years and years back, the hashtag Jaws meets Jurassic Park was actually coined in regard to the Cronus Rising series. So my books are about, giant prehistoric marine predators on the loose and all this. And, they've been bestsellers and won a lot of awards. And there's talks of a movie, God willing. But that's what I do mainly. And so the paleontology aspect of it was more like a hobby, let's say, on the side.
Yeah.
And it's funny, though, because sometimes I think when you have a different tack on things, you can see things that other people don't. So and I'm sorry to try and toot my own horn a little bit, but I was the person who, quote, solved the mystery of plesiosaur locomotion, like the Loch Ness Monster people picture, 4 limbs, paddles and stuff, of how they actually swam. And I did this with the help of 2 paleontologists, which is Professor Mark McMenamin from Mount Holyoke College over in the U.S., and paleontologist and UK fossil hunter Paul de La Salle also. And we did a whole formal paper on this, and there was a great animation that's on my YouTube channel, et cetera. So that was something I did on the side. I also figured out why they had such long necks, some of them, which was to let them swim up behind pools of fish and overcome the fish's lateral line, which are sensors that the fish have on their sides that let them sense things behind them, even in complete blackness.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a little short-range sonar almost, okay? And so with a long-necked plesiosaur coming up behind the school of fish and its head being approximately the same size as the fish in the school, and the giant body at the end of that long neck way back there, the pressure wave generated by the body was not felt by the fish in their lateral line. So the long-necked elasmosaurs and stuff were able to swim up behind the fish and prey on the back of the school and just keep following them along like a cow grazing.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. See? So I do all these things on the side, which I imagine annoys some people because, I'm coming out of left field and be like, hey, no, you didn't figure that out in 150 years of research, but here's the answer. It doesn't go over well. I've, been whatever, lambasted, I think the term is a few times and stuff, like who does he think he is and all this other stuff. But I mean, if you think about it, so let's just say we're looking at elasmosaurs. Everybody thinks that they were these long neck, like snake strikes, wham, grabbing their prey and stuff like that. And the notion that they would just swim along and follow schools calmly and grab a victim and drop back a few feet and grab a victim and drop back a few feet. And there wasn't all this high speed kills. Yeah, some people would find that offensive. Like I'm disillusioning them and all that. But the truth is it was an amazing adaptation, that long neck. And it really allowed them to just, even after mosasaurs, pliosaurs went extinct, elasmosaurs, long-necked plesiosaurs were still there up until the very end. So that anatomy, that morphological adaptation served them well. Think about it. If you're a school of fish, and you're swimming along and, you got Joe one side and Jack the other, and all of a sudden, whoop, Joe's gone. You're like, hey, where'd he go? He must have moved up in the school. You don't realize that there's something, the size of a truck behind you, and this small head keeps coming up and grabbing somebody, and grabbing somebody, and grabbing somebody. It was a perfect adaptation. Yeah. And the same thing ended up applying to Megalodon as I started doing more and more research on that.
Well, I was going to say, obviously, you, as you refer to there, Max, you've had a long love of this particular subject as you, I would say, do yourself down as an amateur investigator and a collector of the fossils. At what point, when you were collecting your Megalodon teeth,
right,
did the spark hit you that set you on the other way to sort of look at this theory and build your case? Because looking at everything you've said and the way you present it and your arguments for it, I find it overwhelmingly compelling.
Thank you. Well, the documentary was a long time in the making because I just can only do so much stuff, at one time. And I have to, so when I do a documentary, I write it, I script it, I narrate it myself. Sometimes I appear in it, and then I even direct it. So I have videographers that do the actual assembly and all that, obviously, because I can only do so much. But thank you. The thing is that, okay, so the thing with the Megalodon is you had 2 sharks there, Initially, there was the one. I'll digress. Megalodon is what's called a chronospecies, they believe, meaning it's one species that has changed and evolved over time. Okay, so it's been around for tens of millions of years, or had been. Okay, past tense, and it went through different stages, etc. Then, at one point, though, it appears to have split. And its direct ancestor, called Ototus chubutensis, or the chub, as I like to call it, which was an animal that exceeded 40 feet in length.
Yeah.
And it appeared to have split off. And they both swam the seven seas at the same time for many millions of years. And eventually, chubutensis died off, and then only Megalodon was left for X number of millions of years, and then it died off. Okay? So when I was looking at these teeth, the first thing I was trying to figure out is, well, how, even a 40-foot shark would be really slow.
Yeah.
They do lose speed over time in terms of size and things like that. And the reason for that is that you've got a skeleton that is made out of cartilage. And cartilage is kind of like rubber. Okay, it really is.
Yeah.
I would try and say tire rubber, but it's really not. It's more flexible than that.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's more like a tendon or something like that. Okay. In fact, when people go on Google at Real Max Hawthorne and go to the YouTube channel and you look at the Megalodon documentary, you're going to see there's a scene where, in fact, it's Jess Tudor, the guy who found that humpback carcass with the giant bites on it, and he's got a basking shark carcass there,
yes.
And you see like the bone, and he takes a jackknife and he slices it like it's cheese.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, and literally like cheese. Okay, no serrations, no sawing. And he says, if this had been a bone, I would not be able to do that, and you would not. And the reason that is because it's cartilage. It's a softer material. So when a shark is small, like 8-10 feet long, if you've ever gone shark fishing like I have and you hook into a 10-foot mako, it's a ballistic missile in the water. These things are going airborne, 20-foot jumps out of the water. You're like, my God, a Corvette with teeth on the end.
Yeah.
Okay. But as they get to a certain size, their size becomes their enemy. And the weak link in that chain, the chink in the armor, as they say, okay, is the skeleton. The largest recorded mako shark, which I believe was around 13 or 14 feet, I think pushing 14 feet in length, and God, it had to be like 1,400 pounds. I saw the jaws and the head mount and spoke to the fisherman who caught it at a big outdoor show in PA many years ago. It might have been Jersey. Well, I get around. Anyway, and they explained to me that they did not get awarded the world record because they thought they had a bluefin tuna on at the time. These guys were tuna fishermen for giant bluefins, and when they fish for tuna, they keep the rod in a rod holder, like in the gunnels, like installed on the side of the boat. Yeah, you've probably seen it in the shows, and they're like cranking the handle and pulling the line even by hand and stuff and trying to wear the fish out. So they're not holding the rod and they're not using a fighting chair. Okay. So when they had this giant shark on, they thought it was a bluefin because it was behaving similarly. Yeah. It did not breach. Never once did it jump out of the water. And that was because the shark did not have the speed and breaching power that its smaller, slimmer versions of itself would have. See? And the same thing applies to white sharks. The bigger they get, the slower they get. So you see like footage of Deep Blue when she's swimming along, and it's kind of funny. Like Ocean Ramsey is swimming with her, or you've got like dolphins swimming. There's one footage I saw where dolphins were swimming around and they were teasing her. Yeah. Like whacking her in the face with their tails as they swam by and laughing about it. Yeah. And stuff like this. And I'm like, my God. And you would think like this 20-foot shark must weigh 5,000 pounds. She's a porker.
Yes. Okay? Massive.
And I'm like, well, why is she putting up with this? And they were like, oh, well, she was on the way to a sperm whale carcass and whatever. Yes. So she was there to scavenge. Okay. And that's obviously easier, but you would still think, if I'm this apex predator and this dolphin that's, like a tiny fraction of my size is like in your face and stuff like that, literally right in your face, you would be like, ooh, here's an immediate meal. Yeah. Fresh dolphin. Oh, but it does nothing. And I believe that's because, part of it is she's tracking it, food, the carcass. But the other is that she knows they will effortlessly evade her.
Yeah.
They're that nimble, and she's wasting her time. So why do it? If a dolphin was bleeding out in front of her, obviously she'd grab it and she'd eat it and so forth, But so I was looking and trying to figure out, well, okay, so how are we having how are these sharks getting their meals? Like the bigger they get, the slower they get.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do also with the vertebrae. So when you have these caudal vertebrae where the tail, sweeps back and forth, remembering those bones are once again made out of cartilage. And that means the tendons that are connecting to them, the ligaments that are holding all this together are attached to cartilage also. So your weak link again are your bones now, which are not bone.
Yeah.
Okay. I equate it to let's say I took I made a tower using tire rubber for girders. Okay. And I made as a home project, I made an imitation of the Empire State Building that was 10 feet tall. And I used tire rubber for the girders. It would hold up great, right? Probably. Tire rubber is pretty sturdy, flexible, and strong. But if I try pulling this off with a 100-foot version, it's going to collapse.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the strength, obviously, at that point. It's the same type of thing. So that's the limitations. And if people doubt that also, you have to look at speed maximums as well. Whale sharks, which can exceed 60 feet in length, as big or bigger than the biggest megalodon that ever lived.
Yeah.
They top out at 5 or maybe 6 miles an hour. It's their flank speed. That's top speed. Okay. Pedal to the metal, as they say. Now you would say, oh, well, they don't need the speed because they have no enemies, but that's not true. Orcas kill whale sharks whenever they want to.
Yeah.
They're kind of sadistic about it.
Yeah.
It's awful. Rip them open, eat the livers, etc. So it's not that they don't have need of speed. They just physically can't do it. And then if you look at the blue whale, which is double the length pretty much and 4 or 5 times the mass of the biggest whale shark ever, but it can do almost 30 miles an hour.
Yeah.
It's 6 times the speed, yet it's 4 to 5 times as big and heavy. How is that possible? That is because it has a skeleton made of bone.
Yeah.
Strong, solid, like the steel girders we would need to build that 100-foot building. Okay. So when I was trying to figure all this out, I'm like, well, what could it be eating then? And I'm like, could it be a scavenger? And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And you have this vision in your head. There's movies out there where you have Megalodon jumping out of the seas and grabbing planes.
Yeah.
And all sorts of craziness like that, and swimming at 50 miles an hour. This stuff, it doesn't even look natural when you see the footage of the fake fin swimming. It's so, because all this water would have to be pushed aside by this giant body. It's not happening, even in the special effects and stuff. But so then I started looking at the evidence we have, which is teeth. Okay. And I started comparing my Chubutensis teeth with my Megalodon teeth. And keeping in mind, these were initially the same animal, and then they branched off and the Megalodon was born, and Chubutensis remained. So Chubutensis, and it's all in the documentary, but I took an excerpt from Wikipedia. The teeth seem similar, but the Chubutensis teeth are not as thick, meaning front to back. Okay. Labial to lingual, meaning they're not as deep, but they have that triangular shape, similar, etc. And there's a difference. They're also missing these what I call flanges.
Yes.
The big reveal is in the principal maxillary teeth. So that means principal meaning the main teeth, the biting teeth at the front of the jaw and the upper jaw. Okay. When sharks feed, especially sharks like white sharks and bull sharks and things like that, they do what is called the fork and knife technique. And a lot of people would think, oh, the lower jaw does the biting, but it's not. It's kind of sneaky. What they do is on their lower jaw, even Megalodon now, they have these narrower, pointier teeth, like a fork.
Yeah.
Okay. And those teeth, let's say they're coming up to a whale carcass or a tuna carcass or a walrus or whatever. The lower jaw teeth, they kind of stab in and they pin. say, to hold. It's like you grabbing a sandwich and you're holding it with your hands, okay, before you take a bite. And then the upper jaw lifts up, it hyperextends. This is something really beautiful, kind of gross looking when you see white sharks do it, where the lips peel back and stuff.
Yeah.
And they hyperextend up, and then the front teeth in the upper jaw, they come down, crunch, and they carve out a bite. So that's how they work. So when I look at these principal maxillary, the upper jaw center primary teeth in Megalodon versus Chubbutensis, I started noticing marked differences. And that was that the Chubbutensis teeth were mainly, for the most part, similar to teeth of a great white, but scaled up. They were bigger, obviously. They were broader a bit, and obviously thicker, obviously because of being much larger, but not proportionally thicker, but, and they were curved a little bit, as are Megalodon's teeth. But what it didn't have was Megalodon teeth have, when they reach a certain size, around when the teeth are maybe 3 to 4 inches long or so, you start to see these teeth, the cores and these upper jaw teeth in the center, they start to get these semi-cylindrical cores in the crowns. Now, the crown means the blade part of the tooth, not the root. Okay. And so the center of these crowns is like a semi-cylinder. They are flat on one side. They are what's called labially flattened. So the labia is the outer part of the tooth, and the lingual side is the inside part of the tooth. So when you see a Megalodon tooth on display, and you see how it looks like round in the center, chunky, you see it on a stem, okay, that's what we call the display side of the tooth. And that is actually the lingual or tongue side, we'll call it, of the tooth. That's really the part that was in the inside of the shark's mouth.
Yes.
The labial side is the flat side of the Megalodon tooth. Okay. And that's the part that's on the outside of the jaws. So if it was coming at you, the teeth would look flat on the outside. But if you saw the underside of the teeth, they have these semi-cylinder thick cores. And at first I was looking at that, I was like, well, maybe it was because the teeth are so big and they needed to absorb shock and all that stuff. But then Chubbutensis didn't have it. And it got to be 44 feet in length, last I read. And that's still a gigantic shark. It weighs like 27, maybe even 30 tons, So why does it not have these cores like this? And then the other part was, in addition to that, the cusps of the teeth, they kind of curve down and outward away from the cores. And they have these thin blade-like curved sections that I call flanges, but they're technically cusps.
Yeah.
And all of this is lined with these hacksaw-like serrations. Now, hacksaws are not used for cutting flesh, per se. When we cut meat, we have a serrated knife, like a steak knife with larger serrations.
Yes.
Hacksaws are for cutting metal and stone, maybe, things that are very hard. So I'm like, well, I wondered, so these must be used for cutting bone then. Well, how would that work? And I was looking at them and studying like some of the images of complete sets of teeth and all this stuff. And then it dawned on me that these teeth had to be used to be inserted into something.
Yes.
Because the tips were narrower and then they flared up as the cusps came out. So it's almost like a log splitter. And if we were on video, I could physically show you a log splitter because I have one on my desk. So a log splitter, a log splitter has like this point. And then it has it flares out and it has serrations, okay? And it's designed we take a log, like a cylindrical section of log, and we put the log splitter in the center of it and we hit it with a hammer or something and it pushes in and the log splits apart and we've got our firewood, right?
Yep.
So I realized then that the Megalodon teeth had the same design, but they weren't splitting logs from the inside because that wasn't an option. They were splitting logs from the outside instead. Except that the logs were ribs.
Yeah.
And that means that these teeth were designed, though, to do a sandwiching type of movement. So when a whale had died of whatever causes, etc., the shark had these teeth that were designed to go up to it, and it could come up to the whale's rib cage, and it could bite down, and instead of trying to just crush through the rib cage, which would cost a lot of teeth. I mean, ribs are big, especially on whales, big, solid bone. You got your teeth, but your teeth are embedded in jaws made of cartilage. They're not super well anchored. We all know sharks lose teeth constantly and are constantly replacing them, So if you come up to a whale and you try and bite through ribs and you lose half your teeth, what are you going to do? Wait 24 hours before your teeth grow back in, which is about how long it takes.
Yeah.
So that didn't work for me. And then I realized, so they must have been designed then to go between the ribs. And then it all started to fall into place, pun intended. So when a shark was eating, it would come up to this dead whale and it would mouth the rib cage, and it would be kind of like you or I sticking our hand into a glove.
Yeah.
There are holes in there for our fingers. We can't see them, but we know they're there. And as I said in the documentary, and we can feel them. So we slide our fingers into the glove, and once we get our fingertips into those 5 holes, what do? We push our hand in, right? It happens every winter.
Yep.
So the shark was doing the same thing. It was feeling for the spaces between the ribs with these upper maxillary teeth. And once it got the tips, which were narrower than the rest of the tooth between each of the ribs there, then it would apply the power of its jaws. Like that. Yeah. And I actually did this. I have to get the footage for it. We made ribs out of wood, and we took fake Megalodon teeth, and we had put them in a press, like a hydraulic press, and lowered it slowly down, and had the teeth go between the wooden ribs. That was soft wood, don't get me wrong, pine, but still. And the teeth were made out of like resin, so it's all fair, okay? Yeah. And as they went down, it went crack, and the ribs all broke apart. So literally, I was able to physically test this hypothesis, okay? And so this means that that's what it was doing, and by doing that, it would avoid losing all its teeth. It would break through the ribs like a nutcracker opening a nut, and then it would be able to access what was inside the rib cage, which is the heart and lungs. Now, one would say, well, why would it need that? I mean, what about the intestines and all the other juicy bits on the whale? Well, this implies, of course, that the shark is a scavenger at this point.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the definition of that in a minute. But because when you're a scavenger, if you're feeding on carrion, you're tracking carcasses by smell, which means they're typically rotting at this point. And it also means that every nibbler in the sea, to borrow a line from one of the Jaws movies, has already taken a stab at it.
Yeah.
So when you get there, that carcass may be largely stripped of blubber and a lot of the juicy bits, but that big rib cage, which other sharks cannot bite through, is there still, and it has the heart, the lungs, which is incredibly nutritious protein. See? So all of this means basically that these teeth evolved as nutcrackers or rib splitters to feed on dead whales. And dead whales, a live whale, let's put it this way, is not going to, as I mockingly showed in the documentary, is not going to lie there and be like, hey, let me just lean back. That's it. All right, now just fit, yeah, a little to the left. Okay, now you can bite me. Okay, it doesn't work like that. So this was teeth that are designed like those of a spotted hyena that were designed to process a carcass, pure and simple. When we compare those teeth to Chubutensis, the differences are apparent. One was more of a flesh eater, a hunter, most of its ontogeny. Ontogeny means over the course of its lifespan. But the Megalodon, its teeth changed from when it was small versus as it became an adult. And I've demonstrated this on videos, and it's in the documentary, so everybody should check that out. But when you look at the teeth of a neonate, of a baby Megalodon, the teeth look almost exactly like that of a great white. There aren't these cusps, there aren't these, they're triangular, they're serrated, they're gorgeous. I have beautiful specimens. And then as they start to get a little bigger in the 10, 12-foot range, maybe something like that, you see the cusps or the crowns, like about midway down, they start to bulge out a little bit. And that's because those cusps are getting ready to form. And by the time it's 25 or 30 feet long, it already has its rib splitters in place. I've demonstrated that. There's a 4-inch tooth in there, which would be about a 30-foot animal.
Yeah.
So now it has these teeth that are designed to process carcasses already. And from that point forward, that's what it does. So the evidence for this was, as you said, overwhelming. Yeah. I mean, like overwhelming. It just, and people, of course, they get very upset about this. And then there were people going around saying, oh, he's claiming Megalodon was a scavenger. And they make this blanket statement.
Yeah.
As if I said that was all it was. And I never said that. That is, I don't want to call it a lie. It's misinformation.
Yes.
term. Okay? They're spreading misinformation. Hey. And so what it is that I never said that it was a, quote, obligate scavenger or anything like that. What I've said, and I'm going to say it again right now, is that initially, when megalodons were younger and smaller, the earlier parts of their lifespan, they were primary hunters because they had the speed and the agility to do it, and secondary scavengers.
Yeah.
So they were hunting. They were hunting the small whales of their day, which were only around 25 or 30 feet long, et cetera. And then when they got to a certain size, it became more advantageous and easier for them because they got slower and slower, more cumbersome. They became primary scavengers and secondary hunters. So it's never an absolute one or the other.
Yeah.
Meaning that, okay, if I'm a 25-foot megalodon and I can swim around still at a pretty decent clip, and stuff, and I can catch some of these whales off guard, I'm making my meal. If I find a dead one or a dead dugong or something like that, am I going to scavenge it? Of course.
Yeah.
Nobody turns down a free lunch.
No.
On the other hand, if I'm a 50-foot breeding female crawling along at 6 or 8 miles an hour, whatever my speed is, top speed, maybe we were generous and said 11 in a documentary, but their cruising speed is 3. So at 3 miles an hour, okay, and I come upon a whale that maybe was attacked by a leviathan, raptorial sperm whale, and it's like barely able to swim. Its flukes are terribly lacerated and stuff, and it's bleeding. Am I going to attack and kill that whale, finish it off? Absolutely. Predator is still there. But if that whale can swim at 30 miles an hour and my maximum speed is a third of that, am I going to foolishly try and chase that whale down and expend all that energy? Probably not. That'd be like Deep Blue trying to chase that dolphin.
Yeah.
See? So they are resigned to relying on their incredible senses of smell to track down prey, and that prey happens to already be dead, though. And when they get to that prey, woe to any other shark that doesn't get out of the way, because then they're on the menu.
Yes.
I mean, there were a lot of other predatory sharks sharing the seas with Megalodon that weren't as big. They were still big and impressive. But let's be realistic. If you're a prehistoric mako, Cosmopolitalis, and you're 20 or 25 feet long, and a 50-foot Megalodon is coming at you and you're tearing away at this carcass, are you going to stand there and risk getting killed? Of course not. You're going to give ground. White sharks are size-oriented, and you can bet that prehistoric sharks were similarly. Might makes right, as they say, etc. So then there was the and I forgot to talk about the whole rib thing. I wasn't just satisfied, though, with the fact of, the teeth being this design. I needed to prove that the teeth actually were used in the means that I described.
Yeah, because I know in your video, what I found it absolutely fascinating, because this is the other thing, Max, that you've got whale bones, rib cage bones, and I loved the kind of description that you go through where you're showing these kind of feeler marks on these ribs, where you can kind of see what we're saying here, that it's trying to get a grip and feel its way into that rib cage, and then you can sort of see the progression as the pressure increases when it finds that sweet spot that it can do what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. And I literally have dozens of these. They are remarkably common fossils, believe it or not, if you know where to look. And you have it where these ribs, and there was a few, like you said, in the documentary were demonstrated, but you'll see where the shark, you don't just grab and feel and you automatically get a fit, because you're piercing a rotting layer of flesh still, to get to the ribs. So you got to feel your way around. So the shark is mouthing its prey. It's like, right, gently biting down, and then it starts to feel like the tips go click, 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 like pegs going in the holes.
Yeah.
And then it knows, now I can bite. And it does. And as the teeth go between those ribs, the tip of the crowns, they go in first, and then those cusps that flare outwards, they start to slice into the side of the rib on multiple sides, because it's tooth, rib, tooth, rib, tooth, rib. See, it's sandwiching effect. Sandwich, like eating that sandwich, kind of like a little dad joke there, stuff. My daughter would roll her eyes if she was here right now. But anyway, so, whereas the log splitter gets hammered into the center of the log and it's pushing outward, See the splitting? The Megalodon obviously couldn't do that. So it's pushing from the outside in, but it's getting its sandwich technique from left and right, left and right, left and right. And that wedge, as they press, both cusps are cutting on both sides of the rib at the same time. And there's animation in the video demonstrators, and it's like crack, and then the shark knows it's through, and it just goes vroom, and it takes out a 2,000-pound mouthful of bone, heart, and lungs. And that's how it's feeding. So the cool part about this is, and well, I will say this, I personally believe that this adaptation, like the sharks that had this tooth change over time, evolution doesn't happen overnight. It's not like one day Chubby Tan just woke up and said, "Hey, I'm a Megalodon now," and he like swam off, went on his own way. You would have, you know what I mean. You have like these cusps, let's say, were starting to, and these crowns design were starting to become a little more prevalent, and it would turn out that the ones that had these crowns that could bite the rib cages better were surviving. And they were passing on their genes, and those genes become more and more reinforced so that the more they had teeth designed to do this, the better they were able to survive. Yeah. They were able to, because the carcasses were always there. Yeah. See? And I believe this also contributed to Megalodon getting larger than Chubbutensis because of the fact that when you're feeding on blubber, which is what sharks love, whale blubber, it's like candy to them. Yeah. Concentrated fat, concentrated calories, sugar rush, whatever you call it. But nutrient-wise, the heart and the lungs are much more nutritious than blubber is. Blubber probably gives you more energy, but in terms of nutrition, think about it, you're eating like lungs and hearts. These are muscles that are constantly working, flesh, okay? And that was not as much empty calories. You need protein to build protein. So I believe this contributed to Megalodon outsizing its cousin Chubbutensis and getting as big as it got. Then the last thing is that this is another bit of misinformation that these diehards. I kind of feel bad for them, It's like it's almost like the shark is like their god, and I'm like tearing down their deity or something like that, or their meal ticket. I don't know what it is, but so the other thing they were saying is like, oh, he's saying the shark is a scavenger. Where's all these carcasses coming from? As if there's ever a shortage of death in this world,
especially in the seas in those times.
Yeah, I mean, come on now. Let's put it this way. If I just went by a numbers game and I calculated, I did this at one point on a whim, how many humpback whales there used to be before whaling. It was in the 1 or 2 million, I forget. And I took their lifespan, and these are obviously like just generic numbers. And let's say they lived 50 years, okay? And there was 1 million of them at any given time. And I just said generically, okay, so they live 50 years. That means every year, 1/50th of the population is going to die.
Yeah.
If you look at it that way, which is kind of like not accurate, but it's not completely inaccurate. But an argument could be made for it, let's put it that way, because they're not immortal. So every year, 1/50th of 1 million whales is going to die. Okay. So, I mean, I should do this in the head, but let's see. Nope, 20,000.
20,000, even more then, yeah.
So you got 20,000 carcasses of whales just dying from natural causes. Look at that. Every year. Okay. And that's just one species.
Yeah.
Okay. But now we're in the prehistoric seas. And remember, we're not saying that all the megalodons are scavengers. Again, let's refute the disinformation, because the smaller ones were still fast enough and nimble enough to make the meals. So we're saying is that it's the big brood stock, fish that are 35, 40, 45, 50 feet long. They're just like, oh, here I am. All right, where's that golden corral? Oh, the buffet, there it is. I can smell it. And then they start working their way towards it. Yeah. It might take them a day to reach a carcass, by smell. But let's think about this logically, okay? We're going to play the numbers game, just to show you how idiotic a statement like that was, like, where are these carcasses coming from? Like, I can't. Harassment and stuff like that is not appreciated, but, I'll try and keep this professional. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that we're looking at the great white shark. Okay? Now, we've got the great whites you see on film all the time, on the news, on documentaries and stuff like that. When you turn on the news and they're talking about a white shark, how big is that white shark typically?
Well, on average, you would say 15 to 20 feet max.
No, but I mean when you see news footage of a great white shark, like when it's one is shown off the Jersey Shore or something like that. You see, if you look at the numbers, most of the white sharks you see on TV are anywhere from 10 to 14 feet in length.
Yeah, pretty average, yeah.
Yeah, and there are more smaller ones than larger ones.
Of course.
Okay, but then we say, okay, well, how many 20-footers are we aware of? How many have you seen footage of?
A handful.
Right. Deep Blue, supposedly.
Yeah.
Although I question her size, to be honest. And, we know from the bite marks there are some giants out there, but we've never seen them on film yet. Okay. So a 20-footer is commonly considered to be the upper size limit for white sharks. At least that's what most people believe.
Yeah.
If we looked at the stats, okay, the average white shark on film is 10, 12, or 14 feet. But we know they get 20 plus. The odds are there's probably 100 white sharks from 10 to 14 feet as there versus every 20-footer.
Yeah.
I mean, think seriously. Let's think about this. Like, how many have we seen on film, versus how many we see of the normal ones? See, shark cage dives, all this other stuff like that, So when they say, oh, there's an 18-footer, that's a big shark. That's a rarity that they see one that big.
Yeah.
So 20-footers are few and far between. 10-footers are common. So the same thing would apply to Megalodon. For every 50-footer, you would probably have 50 or 100 that range from 20 to 30 feet.
Yeah.
Because, they don't all survive to become giants. Because if they did, there'd be giants everywhere.
Yeah,
things happen. They get killed by other animals, other sharks, whatever.
Illness, just general life.
Exactly. So those 50 smaller megalodons are still active hunters. And each one of them is going to go out there looking for a meal once a week or whatever it's going to be and make a kill. They're going to, and let's say they're 25 feet long and the whale they killed is 25 feet long or 30 feet long. All right. And they feed on it. Do they eat the whole carcass?
Of course not.
No. I mean, they can only eat a tiny fraction of it. They're going to feed on the juicy bits, the naughty bits, maybe, as Benny Hill would say, or something like that, whatever. And, I loved him. He was so awesome. He could just give you a look. He was like Johnny Carson, and you just start laughing, because you just knew where he was headed. Yeah. But anyway, so so this smaller shark, it makes a kill, it eats its fill, and it leaves 9/10 of a carcass and swims away. There's a carcass, and a carcass, and a carcass, and a carcass. So you got these 50-to-1 ratios of smaller megs versus the larger ones, and they're all out there leaving meals.
Yeah.
And it's not just Megalodon. You had Chubutensis around for a lot of the same time, doing the same thing. They weren't as big as Megalodon. They were active hunters, so they're all leaving carcasses all over the place. Then you've got the giant mako I was talking about, Cosmopolitatus. You have big great whites back then that were bigger than the white sharks of today on average.
Yeah.
All of these sharks are out there making kills and eating these poor whales and leaving carcasses. I mean, there must have been carcasses everywhere, for God's sake.
Yeah.
So the notion that there were no carcasses is just completely inane. There were carcasses and carcasses and carcasses of carcasses, etc.
Yeah.
It was a buffet. And that worked out perfectly for the mother megs and the big daddy megs and stuff like that, because their own young were feeding them effectively.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah. So and that's just talking about them predating on whales, Max, as well. I mean, there are countless species. There would have been shark on shark attacks.
Shark on shark, shark on dugongs, shark on big sea turtles. I mean, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So you have these smaller, more agile primary hunters out there making kills, and then you have these giant primary scavengers doing the cleanup work. I mean, in one of my novels, like one of the Cronus Rising Kraken books, this guy was all upset because he was saying how somebody had referred to his beloved Megalodon. In the book, there is a Megalodon is not extinct. Just so we're clear on that. But and he was like upset that this scientist called his shark the garbage truck of the seas and stuff like that. Now that was a mean thing to say, and that's not really true. But they were doing a lot of cleanup work. They were like the giant vultures that helped clean up the savannah and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, they it's cleaning up the seas. It helped finish off some of that whale and let the rest of it sink down to the bottom, whale fall, and feed the rest of the ecosystem, etc.
Absolutely. Well, you only have to look at any footage of a carcass that's laying on the ocean floor, Max, to see it's jaw-dropping sometimes when you see all these creatures that are you may never be aware of these creatures, and then everybody comes, has their bits, and then there'll be whatever's left, and then something else comes along, they get their fill, they wander off, then something else. It's remarkable, and it happens on land as well, as you say, you start with the vulture, and then it works down, and it just works down the food chain to the, down to the insects or the ocean's mites and things like that. They will pick a carcass clean.
It's absolutely true. And, which also shows you, though, like if we had Megalodon still with us, you would see those rib cages would be cracked open too.
Yes.
So, you would also see them on the surface, like I said, a breeding population, you would need 500 animals out there, and we would see dead whales, and you'd see these bust-sized sharks, scavenging them, etc. But it doesn't happen. Would I love to see it? I don't know. I wouldn't want to be in the water with one. As slow as we are, we're at the speed where we would fall into that, secondary, hunter stage, and stuff, and we would be an hors d'oeuvre or something like that.
Yes.
But there are apparently mega white sharks out there here and there, and there is a chance eventually we'll see one on film or something, or maybe we'll get lucky or unlucky, and a 30-foot male will encounter a 35-foot female, and they'll make babies, and they'll all of a sudden we'll have mega sharks everywhere.
Yeah. I sometimes when I'm looking into things or researching or watching documentaries about certain things, Max, I hear facts given out, and sometimes I think, how do we know that? And I've seen one about megalodons that they estimate that they went through 40,000 teeth in their lifetime. And I know, as you've referred to earlier, this is one of the other amazing things about sharks, is that they just replace teeth within 24 hours sometimes, because they've got replacements lined up, and when you look inside a shark's mouth sometimes it's remarkable when you see all these teeth just waiting for their turn, as it were.
An assembly line.
Yeah, it's amazing what nature can provide, and it shows you just how adaptable and clever they've had to have been to have survived so long with all these sort of intrinsic skills and the way their bodies have morphed into these production lines of survival, really. As you refer to, if the Megalodon is charging into things and smashing its teeth out of its jaw, well, that's no good. It's got to hang about for a day. Think, well, I've killed it now, but I can't eat it.
Yeah, but the only way a Megalodon could nail a healthy whale was if it caught it sleeping.
Yeah, or giving birth or something like that.
Yeah. And by sheer speed, it just... like I said, like the dolphins in Deep Blue is a perfect example. The whales are always going to be the faster animal. Look at the orca.
Yeah.
An orca, a 30-foot orca that probably weighs about 8 or 10 tons, okay, is the size of a decent-sized adult Chubutensis, okay, or a young adult Megalodon, let's say. But orcas can sustain 35 miles an hour with no problem. They are destroyers.
Yeah. Like
the warship. That's just how it is. That's because their skeletons are incredibly powerful. I've done a blog post showing orcas, as you probably have seen, will sometimes beach themselves hunting seals.
Yes.
They'll come right up into the surf, nail the poor seal, and then squirm back into the water. That's because of their incredible musculature and their bony skeleton. Now, people say, oh, it's because they have ribs. It has nothing to do with that. Sharks have a semi-rib cage of something, but it's made of cartilage.
Yeah.
When a shark, even a small shark, like a 7-foot white shark, you see them all the time, sadly, get beached. They can't get back into the water.
No.
People have to help them.
Yeah.
Okay. Orcas are squirming, going back in. They are just powerhouses, pure and simple.
And clever. Very clever.
Yes, and a little devilish at times. I'm sorry to say. I've seen them messing with their food, smacking, dolphins and sending them 100 feet. That's just mean.
Yeah. Well, the other thing as well is, as we're aware of, I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people, what they know about orcas now to what they thought they knew 15 years ago, Max, has completely changed. Obviously, we've seen these attacks on great whites. We've currently got this gang off the coast of Portugal attacking boats. Mm-hmm. They hunt in packs, as you say. They play with their food. They throw it in the air. Mm-hmm. They can corner a seal on an ice floe and tip it up, blow it, so it tips it over. I mean, this is a remarkably intelligent creature, regardless of anything else it can do.
Yeah, they are the sea's apex predator. I mean, I researched one incident where a small group, I think it was only 6 of them, of transient orcas that are whale killers were out there, and they were tracking a large pod of sperm whale cows and their young, and they called for help, and an army of big male sperm whales showed up to protect them. Mm-hmm. I mean, they outnumbered the orcas like 5 or 10 to 1. You know, you would think just one big male sperm whale would be enough, but they sent like a whole army. That's how nervous they are and how worried they are about these killer whales.
Yeah.
And I'll say something else, though. This is about orcas. The notion of white sharks becoming mega sharks, the killer whales would have an impact on that.
Yes.
Because they don't seem fond of rival predators. They don't seem fond of white sharks, period, the way they act. I don't think it's always just, I want your liver type stuff. I think sometimes it's more like you're a threat or a potential threat, and I'm going to eliminate you.
Yeah.
So and the notion of a shark being 30 or even 40 feet long would probably not sit well with them, and they would probably kill a white shark with gigantism when they encountered it just to eliminate a problem.
Yeah. Well, we've seen, I think there's been reports, maybe off, is it South Africa, where they were wondering where all the sharks had gone, and then they realised there was a pod of killer whales in the area.
Just two whales.
And everybody had gone, yeah, bugger this, we're off. We'll wait till they've gone. I mean, the other interesting aspect of all that, for me, Max, is it just the great white that orcas target? And, as people have said about their livers and this ability to swim up from underneath and stun them, are they going after tigers and bulls as well? Is it just sharks in general?
I've seen footage of them feeding on sleeper sharks or six gills. I've seen footage of them eating tiger sharks. Right. I've seen one of them, chasing down a tiger shark. And a tiger shark was like 12 feet long, and it looks like a child's toy compared to the bull orca chasing it. Yeah. They go after makos, all sorts of stuff. They just don't, and whale sharks and basking sharks, they don't care. They really don't. But, and there's like this whole notion about like who would win in a fight, killer whales or Megalodon. And I did a blog post on it, which again upset probably the same small vociferous group, etc. But the truth is that it would be no contest. You're talking about now orcas, or you got a pod of orcas. Oh, it's no, they're like, oh, well, 1-on-1, but it's not. That's like saying a grizzly bear versus a wolf. Yeah. Wolves don't go by themselves. They live in a pack.
Yeah.
An orca is 3 times plus as fast, top end speed, as a Megalodon shark would be. Its cruising speed is probably close to 3 times as fast also. I think it's 3 versus 8 miles an hour, so almost 3 times as fast. Okay. You're talking an intelligent, organized killing machine, far more nimble, able to turn on a dime, etc., with all the strength, and that was designed to kill the great whales.
Yeah. We
should be clear on that. The theory is that all killer whales evolved as whale killers, but some of them, they believe, a lot of researchers have said this, due to our reducing the numbers of the great whales, the whaling, have altered their feeding habits and switched to preying on other things like salmon and seals and so forth and so on. Okay. But they are physically designed to kill great whales. And one of the reasons, or one of the ways they do this, is they seize, when they go after like a blue whale, which is much bigger than a Megalodon, or a finback whale, which is bigger, and they're also much faster. Okay. They come up behind the whale and they grab it by the flukes, the tail. Okay. And they hold it there to stop it from moving at the surface where it's gasping for air. And then the other ones come in and they bludgeon it to death, push it under and drown it. Okay. Now, the mackerel sharks like mako and the basking shark and the great white and megalodon mackerel sharks are what is called obligate ram ventilators. And what that means is they are obligated to keep moving forward to breathe.
Yes.
Okay. They have to ram their way through the water, so they push the water in their mouth and through their gills, and that's how they avoid suffocating.
Yeah.
They cannot do what's called buccal pumping, which some sharks can do, where they can and kind of like, do it that way, although it's much more comfortable to swim. In their case, like when an orca kills a great white, it doesn't have to necessarily turn it upside down to inflict tonic immobility on it, which, if people don't know this, if you turn a white shark upside down, it's paralyzed. It just doesn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. They flip them, don't they?
Yeah. But all that an orca would have to do to a megalodon to defeat it would be to seize it by the tail.
Yeah.
A big bull would come up, grab it by the tail, hold that tail, okay, and once it can't swim, it begins to suffocate immediately.
Yeah.
You don't even have to force it underwater like you do with an air-breathing whale where, it needs to get to the surface. They would just, one or two of them would grab it by the tail and or a fin, and they would hold it still there, and it's like, and the rest of them might bludgeon it and start ripping it apart while it's still alive, and it would not be pretty. And the shark would not be able to defend itself. It is too slow. It is too, I don't want to say dumb, but I mean, let's be realistic here. Whales, dolphins have brains proportionally as big as ours, if not bigger.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you've got, the organized attack, it would be, and the shark cannot fight what's behind it. See, like the other day I was driving along, I on my way to pick up my daughter at school, and I watched these two crows beating the snot out of a red-tailed hawk that was at least double their wingspan and 8 times their mass.
Yeah.
It didn't have a prayer. The crows were nimbler, more maneuverable. They were just coming up behind it, wham, 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 just raking it, hitting it. And the poor hawk was like bewildered and trying to it finally went into a tree to hide. Okay. The same thing applies. The hawk cannot fight what's behind it. Flying or moving through the water is the same type of thing.
Yes.
See? So this leaves the shark with its everything from the gills back is vulnerable. See? So if you have a pot of orcas on your butt, you have a big problem.
Yeah.
It would be like one of those World War II bombers, let's say, being attacked by a bunch of Messerschmitts, but it doesn't have a tail gunner.
Yeah.
It can't shoot behind it. And then planes come up behind it, and they cut you to pieces, and you're gone.
Yeah.
Say,
yeah.
Or whatever. So that's just how it is.
I saw, I'm not sure if you've seen it, there's some footage come out in the last couple of weeks, Max, of, I think he was in New Zealand, a paddleboarder, and an orca just appears swimming under it. And I have to say, as I've mentioned earlier, 10 years ago, I'd have gone, oh, isn't that amazing? And then now I think, Jesus, he's very lucky. Why do you think we don't get the reports of orcas coming after, as we were saying earlier about them beaching and getting seals? Do you think that it's one of those things that people just don't look for or talk about, and everybody thinks if somebody disappears swimming, a shark's got him?
Well, I think sharks are responsible for a lot more disappearances than we believe. There was I think was in Australia. Oh my God, I can't remember the guy's name. Vic Hislop is his name. He was like a professional white shark killer and stuff. Not very popular nowadays because of that.
Yes.
But he literally said that he would catch and kill white sharks, and every year he was finding multiple white sharks. It's on his website actually, if it's still up, VicHislop.com. But and that had somebody's legs in its stomach, somebody's feet in its stomach.
Yeah.
These sharks were killing a lot more people, and then the government was just writing them off as drownings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the truth is that, there are more shark attacks than people, I'm sorry to say, than people believe. That doesn't mean that we should hunt down and murder all the sharks. I think we should be more careful or figure out ways to protect ourselves better, keep them away from beaches or stuff like that. But I think that you got to remember you're dealing with highly intelligent, emotional animals, family-oriented animals.
Yeah.
These creatures are probably as smart as the people you went to high school with.
Yeah.
Or at least grade school.
Yeah.
They are really, really intelligent animals. They may not have our technology, but that doesn't mean that they're stupid. And they also teach one another. They learn, etc. So I believe, this is my personal philosophy, that the orcas have seen what we've done to the great whales. They've watched, they've heard, they've smelled, they have seen blue whales that it would take an army of them to kill, blown apart, ripped out of the water, torn to shreds, and the rest discarded. They have watched this nightmare unfold. And this memory has been passed on from whale to whale, from generation to generation. It still goes on in some places, to be honest.
Yeah.
Whales are still being killed and processed, etc. Not on as big of a scale, obviously. But the point is, orcas know this. They know what we're capable of. So why poke the bear?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have heard people put forward the reason what's going off the coast of Portugal is that these are a sort of vigilante pod who are striking first because, as far as they're concerned, a boat to them is a predator and they want it out of the way.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that we're taking all their fish and they're starving to death. And that's, and if that's true, that's a messed up thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be other ways. And I'm not talking about eating bugs and stuff like that. We have fish farms and the ability to do all this stuff. I mean, the striped bass, for example, do you know what a striped bass is?
No.
It's a very popular game fish here in North America. It's a large fish. They can be, I think the record on rod and reel was around 80 pounds or something like that. And they get bigger than that. But, good sized adults are 30, 40 pounds. They're delicious. They were so heavily fished and so heavily predated on with trawlers and stuff like that the species became endangered. And they had to put out a moratorium to protect the stripers. At first you weren't allowed to keep any, then there was one, it had to be a certain minimum size, etc. And they've rebounded now, and striper stocks are fantastic. So it is easily within our power to manage things like that sensibly without starving the resident killer whales.
Yep.
They've been there long before us. That's their water.
Yeah.
Right? We're just visitors, honestly. They live there. Okay? We're working there.
Yes.
Okay? We need to cut them a break. We need to, and they are the apex predator.
Yeah.
They deserve respect.
Yeah.
Pure and simple.
Yeah.
I mean, they outlasted Megalodon.
Yeah.
And they're here.
Yeah.
They deserve respect.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before we suddenly see summer holidays take a bit of a different turn, I suspect, Max. In certain countries, they'll be staying off the beach won't be just because there may be a shark in the water.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, I would hate to see that, because then obviously it would be spun, and then they would want to go kill the workers responsible, and they would, shoot them from a plane or from a helicopter.
Horrific.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are intelligent family animals.
Yeah.
And they're not going to, if one's wounded, they're not going to abandon it, which would make it easy to wipe out an entire pod.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're taking their food, we need to figure out a way to stop doing that. Pure and simple. Greed has its limits. Or should.
Definitely. I think that's a good place to park it, Max. So, my friend, what have you got coming up? I know, as we've said, a man of many interests and talents and projects. What's happening for you right now, and what you got coming up next, my friend?
Well, I'm obviously doing some writing on the side. I am producing some amazing documentaries that are going to be coming out soon as well. So there's that going on. I will let you know. It's I've got some stuff coming that's going to blow a lot of people's minds. Let's put it that way. I would also invite, if for all your listeners, if you haven't gone to my website yet, which is either maxhawthorne.com or cronusrising.com, and that's Cronus with a K, not the Roman spelling, I think it is. But anyway, if you go on there, first off, there's a newsletter you can register for with updates on everything that's coming, et cetera. There's also a free book section with lots of downloads that you could take advantage of as well. So a lot of great stuff. If anybody wants to find me on Facebook, it's facebook.com/real Max Hawthorne. A lot of people out there using my name for some reason. I don't know why. But anyway, I'm not kidding. Dude, there's dozens of inactive Max Hawthorne accounts. Just blanks. If you look it up.
It's the Megalodon fans, Max.
I don't know. It's like they're trying. If somebody's looking for me, they're trying to hide me so that I can't be found. So if you look up facebook.com, real Max Hawthorne, that's me. Okay. The same thing if you Google for YouTube, if you look up at real Max Hawthorne, that'll take you to my YouTube channel. The Megalodon documentary with the whole scavenger information. It's like half an hour long. So get some popcorn. You're going to really enjoy it. It was incredibly well produced, is on there. And right behind it is that mega shark or Megalodon one with the evidence of that 32-foot great white. So for all the shark fans out there, lots of freebies for you that you're really going to have a good time with.
Fabulous. Can't recommend it highly enough. I've learnt a lot since I got to know you, Max, and I always keep up to date with your work and what you're doing, and it's incredible the leaps that we are undertaking in regards to increasing our knowledge of the oceans and the creatures that we thought we knew so much about, and yet obviously we know so very little still. So thank you as always. I look forward to our next conversation, and thank you for your time as always.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor and a privilege, as Benny Hill would say.